In today's video, we're going to take a look at a video posted on Vegan Linked featuring a vegan activist named Michael Gregor. He's a big figure in the vegan community, so he should be pretty persuasive. Let's see if we're going to be eating vegan from today on.
George McGovern, who died last year, age 90, was best known for his 1972 presidential defeat to Richard Nixon. But he also chaired a committee that released the first dietary guidelines in the United States in January 1977. The simple fact is, quoting from the press conference, that our diets have changed radically within the last 50 years with great and often very harmful effects on our health. These dietary changes represent as great a threat to public health as smoking. The diet of the American people has become increasingly rich in meat and other sources of saturated fat and cholesterol, and in sugar.
This is a good place in the talk to start off. We have a professor of nutrition pinpointing a health hazard in having a rich diet. He specifies saturated fat, cholesterol, and sugar as the problematic aspects of the diet.
Most all the health problems underlying the leading causes of death in the United States could be modified by improvements in diet. Ischemic heart disease, cancer, diabetes, hypertension are diseases that kill us. They're epidemic in our population. We cannot afford to temporize. The public wants some guidance, wants to know the truth, and hopefully today we can lay the cornerstone for the building of better health for all Americans through better nutrition.
This is all noble and good. A person of science noticing a problem in the general population and wanting to make steps to change things for the better. Providing truthful information to people, educating them, is the way to make positive change. Gregor goes on to list criticisms of the dietary guidelines, but he hadn't shown what they were exactly. He didn't really present anything other than quotes. The following quotes from meat, egg, sugar, and salt producers have no intellectual weight here. I don't know what they are commenting on, and in any case, I'm not interested in what people with special interests have to say. I want to see results of how the dietary changes were applied and if they helped.
So, what happened with the fox guarding the henhouse? Well, with reduced consumption as an obvious threat to the well-being of the meat, dairy, and egg industries, they quickly mobilized to mount massive campaigns to try to discredit the growing scientific evidence that diets high in animal products promoted disease. And since that time, under meat industry pressure, the recommendation to decrease consumption of meat morphed into have 2 or 3 servings a day. The question is why? 2 reasons why the guidelines may be more interested in protecting industry interests than adhering to the science are conflicts of interest within the USDA itself, as well as conflicts of interest within the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee.
Yes, we know that conflicts of interests exist on both sides. Yes, we know that similarly, sugar, grain, and soy producers also lobby to have their products seen as less deleterious than they really are. Decades of people eating copious amounts of sugar in various forms, and significantly less red meat, saturated fat, and cholesterol, doesn't seem to be producing the positive outcomes that would compel a person to want to mimic those dietary habits.
Global dietary guidelines can best be summed up in cartoon form. The new dietary guidelines have been released. They tell us to eat healthier, but not so healthy as to noticeably affect any corporate profits.
It never ceases to amaze me how much pot and kettle calling happens in these kinds of conversations. The video is more than half over, and all that we've heard is what we already know. People put money over health. What else is new? Are you going to present anything that will motivate me to eat vegan, as the title suggests?
So, eat more messaging is clear, but eat less messaging devolves into talk of biochemical components. Americans need to cut down on saturated and trans fatty acids, whatever that means. Well, see, that's code for eat less meat, dairy, and junk, but they can't just come out and say that. Take the latest dietary guidelines, for example, which echo the National Academies of Sciences, the most prestigious scientific institution in the country, that dietary cholesterol consumption should be as low as possible. Where's dietary cholesterol found? Only in animal products. Right? So saying dietary cholesterol consumption should be as low as possible is essentially saying meat, dairy, and egg consumption should be as low as possible.
Great. Now there's finally something for us to sink our teeth into. Gregor mentioned before that there is a misleading way of not saying exactly what something means. He suggests that it would be better to be frank and say meat, dairy, and egg consumption should be as low as possible. However, this is also misleading and potentially dangerous. Lean white meat is an excellent source of animal-based protein and fat-soluble vitamins. You know, the ones our bodies use much more effectively and efficiently than their water-soluble counterparts. Those are also only found in animal products. On top of this, these lean meats are quite low in cholesterol. Properly sourced, what would be the problem with consuming those then? Cholesterol is vital to human function and development. That means that it belongs in the human body. The body produces it and will make less if you eat some. One egg contains about 200 milligrams of cholesterol that is not harmful to the human body. It would seem that if I eat one egg a week, I'd be fine. Cholesterol seems to start to become problematic with an overconsumption of carbs, which incidentally are truly the only extraneous nutrient of the macronutrients. We need fat and we need protein. On a fundamental level, we don't need to eat carbs to thrive. Our body makes as much glucose as we need at any given time, so dietary carbohydrates seems to be the thing that should be limited, as it doesn't seem to carry with it the abundance of nutrition that animal fat tends to, and the presence of them seems to make it harder for the body to perform its natural processes.
In other words, the dietary guidelines are effectively saying everyone should eat vegan, as low as possible.
I didn't get that from that. There's still a lot of groundwork to be done. I haven't been shown how or why cholesterol is so bad. I haven't been shown that about saturated fat either. I'm privy to the fact that sugar is supremely problematic and a vegan diet is primarily that. So I need more proof of literally anything that Gregor is trying to promote. Also, we still need to look at what it means to eat vegan and the impact of that on the human body. Then we compare the two and try to see which is better. As a layperson, I am constantly bombarded with conflicting information, so it would be nice if people actually focused on real-life outcomes rather than sophomoric levels of whatever it is Gregor is doing in this talk so far. He goes on to mention the conflicts of interest again, and it's becoming clearer to me that we're not going to see anything in support of what he's promoting, only things to discredit the opposite, which just leaves me lost in the middle, thinking I can't safely eat anything and survive for any decent measure of time.
My name is Dr. Michael Gregor with nutritionfacts.org. This month, a paper was published in the Journal of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics that found that essentially there's been no change in processed meat consumption over the last 20 years or so, which represents just an abject failure of all of us in the public health community to warn people about the very real risks of processed meat: bacon, ham, hot dogs, lunch meat, sausage. Right? These are known human carcinogens. The official 2018 IARC report couldn't have been clearer. Quote, consumption of processed meat causes cancer of the colorectal. Quote, that's our second leading cancer killer of men and women combined. We know these foods cause cancer. I mean, we try not to smoke around our kids. Why would we send them to school with a bologna sandwich?
From what I understand, we are eating more meat, just not red meat, which was the only kind of meat that was demonized in the video so far. Now he's talking about processed meat. They are not the same, so why? I think most people understand that highly processed foods are bad. What does that have to do with high-quality steak?
That's not hyperbole. According to the Surgeon General, living with a smoker increases risk of lung cancer 15%. So the cancer risk of secondhand smoke is comparable to the 16 or 18% increased risk of colorectal cancer, eating the equivalent of a single sausage link a day. You know, the 2015 dietary guidelines really appeared to drop the ball on this issue, saying processed meat could be accommodated as long as sodium and saturated fat limits were within limits. But that's ignoring the cancer risk, which we've known at least back since 2007, when the first comprehensive analysis was published by the American Institute for Cancer Research. In fact, one of their top 10 recommendations for cancer prevention: avoid processed meat, full stop. American Cancer Society also encouraged people to minimize intake of processed meat. We cannot allow the billion-dollar meat industry to continue to subvert the science when so many million lives are at stake.
I don't disagree that people should eat less processed foods. It's not just meat, though, and this has nothing to do with real meat, dairy, and eggs.
Lives are at stake, no pun intended. It's instructive, I think, that there are more conflicts of interest from the dairy industry than from any other single commodity. Nearly two-thirds of dietary guidelines around the world grant dairy its own food group. Yet most people in the world are lactose intolerant, meaning they're unable to digest milk as adults.
Oh, hello, anecdote. Fancy meeting you here. Actually, I thought I had a milk intolerance. Then, I cut grains and other completely unnecessary foods out of my diet for a trial period, and I stopped getting diarrhea, bloating, and cramps after drinking milk. It's almost like if you stop putting things that don't belong in your body, it can handle dairy much better.
Most people on the planet experience symptoms like bloating, abdominal pain, intestinal gas, watery stool, even sometimes nausea and vomiting when they drink milk.
Sounds like me after a salad. And it pains me to say this because vegetables are still one of my favorite things that we eat. Is this supposed to be the reason not to consume dairy? Because now we're striking vegetables off the list of things I can feel confident in consuming, and there's not much left on the list. What, spices? Nuts?
The global estimate, lactose intolerance, is more than 2 out of 3 human beings on this planet. Though in the United States, it's closer to 1 out of 3. But 95% of Asian Americans, 60 to 80% of African Americans and Ashkenazi Jews, 80 to 100% of American Indians, and 50 to 80% of Hispanics have trouble digesting milk. It's really mostly those of Northern European origin who can handle it into adulthood. So, for the dietary guidelines, to say everyone should drink milk seems like an example of racial bias in the federal nutrition policy. It's like they're assuming everyone's of Northern European descent.
I think milk is a special case. I mostly use dairy as supplementation. I've recognized the importance of fat in the human body, but I was brainwashed through my life to be scared of animal fat. So for most of my adult life so far, I'd been straining and draining and trimming, and I don't have a great taste for it. Dairy helps me pick up the slack. But of all the moral arguments, I find dairy consumption the hardest to justify, so I don't really have much to say from that standpoint. Regardless of how difficult it is for these people to consume milk, I think it is a vital source of nutrition for people in poorer areas of the world. If they didn't have to rely on cheap sources of energy and grains and things, they might not have such a hard time digesting it. Maybe the racist bit is assuming that people who rely on milk as a source of vital nutrients should have that life-changing boost of nutrition stripped away from them with some kind of special plant or supplement that isn't widely used in their country being the recommendation, without the provision of infrastructure to make it available to them.
Is their ability to digest milk really an advantage? Take Finland, for example. After World War II, Finland joined us in packing on the meat, eggs, and dairy, and by the 1970s, mortality rate from heart disease in Finnish men was the worst in the world, bumping us to number 2. They didn't want to die, so they got serious. Heart disease caused by high cholesterol. High cholesterol is caused by saturated fat intake. So the main focus of the strategy, let's reduce the high saturated fat in the country. Well, what does that mean? Well, here in the U.S., it's cheese, chicken, cake, and pork, essentially. So a berry project was launched to help dairy farmers make a switch to berry farming, whatever it took. And indeed, many farmers did switch from dairies to berries. They pitted villages against each other in kind of friendly cholesterol-lowering competitions to see who could do better. So, okay, how did they do? Well, on a population scale, even if mortality rates dropped just a few percent, that could save, thousands of lives. But instead, remarkably great changes took place, particularly for their cholesterol-lowering dietary changes. We're talking an 80% drop in cardiac mortality across the entire country. The greatly reduced cardiovascular and cancer mortality translated to a 6 to 7 year extension in life expectancy across the board. That's what real dietary guidance can do.
The problem with research like this is that it fails to mention that decreasing consumption of milk was not the only change that these people made. I'm just a regular person, but even I have some questions. According to an article I found related to the project, they also strove to improve their lifestyles by reducing smoking, and they made other dietary changes like eating more fruits and vegetables and less salt. They improved their environment by creating local clubs, among other things. In short, they tried to make it holistic. So in the end, which change had the greatest impact? Which change had little to no impact? Why single out the reduction in milk consumption as the most impactful thing? I think the quitting smoking and improving community support could also play a big role in producing healthier, happier people with greater longevity. So, if they kept drinking milk throughout that, how would it have impacted the results? The world will never know. He goes on to introduce more examples of meat and dairy lobbying in efforts to, in this case, undermine Canada's decision to remove dairy as a food group in their guidelines. Regardless if they did or not, a recent check of Canada's food guide has not eliminated milk or dairy from what's listed under Guideline 1.
But look, we don't have to wait till the guidelines change. There are amazing things happening right now all over the world. Less than a month ago, New York City announced they were making the meals at all of their 11 public health hospitals plant-based by default. Healthy meals in a hospital? What a concept.
I think I just died a little inside. At first glance, the most I can say towards understanding why is that it will save them money and make them money, as meat and dairy is expensive, and sugar makes people sick. So yay for New York, proving once again that profit trumps health.
Do you live in a city? Like, why not petition your local hospitals to follow in New York City's shining example?
Because I don't want my fellow human beings to get even sicker and die even sooner than they are doing now?
It is not enough for each of you to live your own little vegan life in your own little vegan bubble while the world burns. You need to become activists. And for those of you who think, wait a second, what can I do? I'm just one person. Look around you. You're not just one person, right? Entire organizations are represented here that you can join and support and volunteer and work for, right? ProVeg, for example, doing amazing work, right? Join in, get active, and we can replicate these kinds of victories around the world. Thank you.
And that's how the video ends. To sum up, we heard some information about how decreasing certain nutrients found in certain animal foods, along with a number of other dietary and lifestyle changes, can help some humans live longer and healthier. And that's it. That's not vegan, not even by a long shot. So I fail to see how I am meant to feel compelled to eat vegan based on this video. And you? What impact did it have on you? Let me know in the comments below if you find content like this compelling and why.